All right, so we're here with the co-founders of Mind Education and the co-creators of an exciting product called CoreAtlas. And first, we want to know, what is CoreAtlas and how does it benefit students and parents and teachers?
Well, thank you for having us, David. We're excited to talk with you about this new development. Really, the CoreAtlas is a revolutionary new way to learn that puts the child on top and in control. It's a way for a child to self-direct their learning through mathematics, reading, writing, science, all those complex standards that are good to know. And the CoreAtlas, where we've gone with this journey so far, is for 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, where they're really learning some of the fundamentals of these topics. And we've really opened it up to allow children to set their own personal goals too. And when we mean self-direct their learning, we really mean to self-direct their learning. And that's what I think is most exciting about our project, is that it allows a child to think their thinking through. And instead of getting tests, they advance their own learning using a process of thinking called metacognition. Metacognition simply means thinking about your thinking as you learn.
Yeah, I think a nice way to understand what CoreAtlas is to imagine yourself on a hike. When I go hiking with a group of people, maybe one person has the map, and if that one person has the map, then they know where we're going, where we might stop on the way, but I want my own map, right? And I find that other people do too, because we want to be able to look at the map and go, like, oh, okay, I can see we're going over there, but let's go this way. Or I'd like to go here first, or after we go there, let's go there, right? We all want our own pathways, and we all want our own entry points, and the same thing is true of young people and their education. And the only way they can really self-direct their learning, the only way they can really hold that big picture map and navigate themselves is if they actually have their own map. And so we decided to make that map. And so CoreAtlas is a series of maps and guidebooks so that a young person knows where they're going, where they need to go, but also can come up with their own goals of where they want to go, and they can chart their progress along the way. And this is really important because, as we all know, obviously, the world is changing rapidly. And what used to be helpful in terms of our education system back in the Industrial Revolution and even like in the 1950s, where like you grew up, you got a job, and you had that job for the rest of your life, that's going away. Our young people need entrepreneurial skills in order to be successful. People are going to be, contractors and freelancers, where they need to know how to promote themselves, how to look around and establish what's a need and how can I contribute. And so our education system needs to give young people those skills of metacognition, like Paul was saying, being able to think about your thinking, being able to see big picture, okay, where have I gone and where do I want to go? And this is where Paul and I become pretty passionate about this being a social justice issue. Because if only a few young people are growing up prepared to really own their experience, then we will just maintain things the way that they are. And we will have some young people who are growing up in communities where they don't have the same amount of resources, and they will continue to not be prepared for their future. And that feels wrong. So we wanted to make the CoreAtlas because we feel like all children deserve that opportunity and right. One of them, it's underwater. So the young person can actually see, okay, here are all these things that I'm going to learn, and I'm going to create some that I want to learn for myself as well. Which one do I want to do first, and how do I want to get there? And because we feel like a big picture is a good start, but not enough, we also make guidebooks. And so the CoreAtlas is also a guidebook. And inside the guidebook, each page explores one of those things that a young person is going to learn, but it helps them think things through so that they can learn how to learn, which will help you, obviously, in anything you want to learn in life. Because it's great, one of the things to learn, this is a speaking and listening skill, to be respectful in discussions and follow discussion rules that you agree to. Well, great, that's a valuable thing to be able to do in life. But what's really valuable is to be able to self-assess, to think like, am I not really able to do that yet? Okay, and if that's the case, then what do I wonder about, and who should I ask for help? Am I on my way? I'm sort of able to follow discussion rules. Okay, then what are my challenges? And what's my plan to get better? Or do I feel like I already know how to do this? Okay, so what's my evidence? How can I demonstrate to myself and to others that I know how to do this?
So what we've done is we've tried to create a self-grading system so that we don't have to rely on somebody else to tell us what we're good at.
Right.
So, of course, we're trying to help out because we all know that enthusiasm for school plummets. From 95% up in kindergarten, it plummets to less than 50% in 6th grade. And that's terrible because they haven't lived their life yet and they're becoming sort of just turned off to learning.
Well, and I think it's, there could be a lot of reasons, right? But I was an elementary school teacher for 10 years, and I felt like I was doing a great job at the time, and parents loved me, and kids loved me. But when I was honest with myself, I think even I could see why. It's because school starts off as this, like, wow, it's this social experience, and I'm around a lot of kids, and there's just all these things that I'm going to learn, and I'm going to become, a serious adult eventually.
And I'm going to go to college.
This. Yeah, I'm going to go to college. But they slowly start to realize that actually there's this teacher who has essentially this map that we've created. The teacher has the map in their minds, and I'm just playing follow the leader. And okay, I'm supposed to do this worksheet now? Oh, now I'm supposed to do this project? Even when they love their teacher, they start to get that school isn't actually about me. It's about me fitting into the parameters that have been established for me that I don't even get to find out what they are. I just have to show up for them.
It's not surprising that the children are not able to know why they're in school. The standards, when we're talking about the Common Core standards for mathematics, for language arts, the next generation science standards that I'm sure you're going to be hearing a lot about, they were written at a college reading level for 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds. So they're freely available online as a PDF, but most adults have a really tough time understanding what they say. So what we've done is we've taken those standards and transformed them into something kids will enjoy. Put it into kid-friendly language. And we all know that our world is moving towards a visual language. We've worked with artists from around the world to illustrate every page of the CoreAtlas so that the artwork is unique. And that's something that a lot of people talk about: STEAM, science, technology, engineering,
art,
mathematics, but rarely is it put into action. We have put in one guidebook all of these topics, and as Sarah mentioned, personal quests too, so that a child can come up in simple words and state what they want to do. At the Educational Options Expo, a little boy, 7 or 8 years old, comes up to me and he says, "Oh, I can learn anything?" I said, "Yeah, sure you can." He says, "Well, I'm just a kid, but I want to learn how to fix cars." I said, "Wow, that's amazing." He says, "But I don't know how to do it." I said, "Okay." I said, "The first step to setting your own goals, visualize yourself doing it." So then he drew a picture of himself doing it. He put it into words. And he drew this car with this huge intake valve that was taken in, and he was under it. He goes, "Okay, but I still don't know how to fix cars." I said, "That's okay." I said, "Do you have questions?" And he said to me, he goes, and I don't even know how to do this, but he says, "I want to know how the pistons connect to the axle." I said, "That's a good question. Could you write it down?" So he writes it down. And he said, "Do you have anyone in your life that you can ask?" He says, "My uncle. My uncle fixes cars." I said, "That's amazing." I said, "Wouldn't it be great to know the answer to that?" And then we moved up this learning journey path. And he said, "Well, what are your challenges?" He says, "Well, nobody teaches me how to fix cars yet." And he says, "But wait, I can go to my uncle's auto body shop." And I said, "That is a great move."
What warms my heart is that this young boy had this opportunity to have this conversation with you, right? And you knew the questions to ask him to get him to the next place. Okay, well, what do you wonder? Well, could you ask for help? And I think what I'm so passionate about with the CoreAtlas is that we've tried to take what we know works in teaching. So you were able to, because Paul has this background of being a college professor, of being a high school teacher, he's worked with young people for a long time. He knows the questions to ask to get them to go to the next level with their thinking. But with the CoreAtlas, we've tried to take what Paul knows works as a teacher, what I know works as a teacher, and then also we like just surrounded ourselves with the research of what's really helpful in teaching and learning, insights from cognitive neuroscience with Paul's background, having studied that, and put them in a package so that a young person can access that on their own. Whether they have somebody asking them those questions or not, they can ask themselves those questions and start to embody it.
And it really flips the power dynamic that you were talking about with one teacher on top to all students on top, regardless if they're in a classroom or a homeroom or going to visit a museum, which is some of our best learning opportunities. And what we really wanted to do is we really wanted a system to draw people in. You know, we're not trying to stuff things into heads. That's not the way that learning works. And so we know that we need artwork there. And so we teamed up. I don't know if you saw on the back of our CoreAtlas product, we have images of all the artists that we've worked with and we know personally now. Because every child's artwork style, just like every child's learning style, what every child desires for their own personal goals, it's all unique. So it's this tough balance that we've been trying to meet. We need to know how to count. We need to know how to read. We need to know how to speak and communicate, like you were saying before.
Right.
But we do need a different option for every child to get there. And this is our solution.
Great. No, that brings us to the next question is, what inspires you to co-create Mind Education, and what's the mission behind it?
Yeah, so David, that's a great question. I was on a tenure track as a professor of psychology at a liberal arts school, and I loved teaching, I loved doing my research, but I realized that it was costing children $40,000 a year to go there. Most of the students at this school were products of the public education system, and so most of them weren't ready to handle college level material. And I felt bad. I literally felt bad. Parents were taking out mortgages, second mortgages on their homes to pay for college when that information was already available in high school and even before. So I had to leave, and I thought my first idea was to create brain materials to teach people about their brains. Well, as it turns out, not everybody needs to teach their children about brains. And so we really found out where education was right now and how can we meet those needs. So after a lot of thinking, Sarah and I had an aha moment. And by this time, we had formed a company, and our company, as you mentioned, was called Mind My Education. Kind of like put some mind in my education. And our mission is still to cultivate a compassionate society of aware, curious, and empowered learners. And so just to unpack that a little bit, we need a society that thrives. And how do we get there? We need people to be turned on. And I think a lot of our media in today turns people off. And sometimes school turns people off, as some of those graphs show.
Yeah, and before you share that aha moment, I mean, the way that we both got to this aha moment together with the CoreAtlas and with My Education is that, like Paul shared, you know, he was not satisfied with the way he was contributing to education and wanted a different route so that he could help more people. And meanwhile, I was an elementary school teacher, like I had said earlier, for 10 years, and there was so much about it that I loved. That it was an honor that parents sent 25 kids every day to be with me for 6 hours. And so I tried to make the most of every moment of it, and I started noticing a pattern. Kids who had had me in previous years would come back to visit me, and kids who had been like lit up about the world and, you know, their part in it, started to get a little less inspired. I don't want to say that they were dimmer, because I still saw so much light within them, but they started to realize that their education system was not going to be encouraging that within them. I started having parents come to me saying, like, what did you do to my child? And me feeling like, what do you mean? And people being serious when they said, like, you kind of ruined my kid. My kid was so excited being in your class, and now every year after year, they're just depressed about school. What did you do? And, you know, at first I was defensive and was like, well, you know, everyone else is doing it wrong. But when I looked closer at what I was a part of and how, you know, sure, I was really positive with the kids, and so they loved me, and I got to know them as people, but, you know, I was giving tests constantly, because that's what we're told to do. So we give tests to figure out if kids know things or not. We don't check in with them to see, like, you know, how do you feel like you're doing, and what do you need to get better? And so I started to have a lot of cognitive dissonance, really. Started watching some Ken Robinson talks and hearing that schools are killing creativity, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm not killing creativity, but I'm looking more broadly at the system I am a part of. And I think this is something really hard for teachers, because really, I don't think there's a teacher out there who is doing anything but loving their kids. Like, they love their students, and they're trying so hard to give this meaningful experience. But I think it's hard for us as teachers to step back, because there's no time to step back.
Yeah.
You know? But if we do step back, we start to see and to wonder if maybe things could be different. And so for me, I took a year off. I took a year leave. I'm going to step back, and I'm going to see, could I do things differently in the classroom? Could everyone do things in the classroom? Like, what options are there? And in that year, you know, Paul was working on my education, he was working on brain science curriculum, I was helping a little bit, and I was also thinking, okay, so do I go back to teaching the next year? And I had, to be completely honest, I had like a little temper tantrum about it. And I said, I can't go back to teaching next year, I won't do it. I said, the only way that I'll do it is if I could give the students, like, just on the first day of school, here's everything the school expects you to learn. Go ahead and circle the things you're excited about, cross off the things you don't care about. I'm going to talk to you about those things, and we'll see if actually they are worthwhile. And we're going to go from there. And you're going to, you know, let's knock out the stuff that we're supposed to do so that you have plenty of time to do the stuff that you want to do. We can do this together. But Paul kind of, you know, laughed at me and said, you know, have you looked at the standards lately? Don't you remember? They're really hard to understand. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll translate them. I'll make them really simple. And then I'll give them the list. And he's like, I don't think you want to give 8-year-olds a list.
So we do actually have the list in the back of our book, and teachers find it to be very helpful, and parents too would find it to be very helpful to know what their children are learning at school. We've simplified it into just a few words for practices, operations in algebra, base 10 numbers, fractions, you name it, in language arts as well as in science. But we needed to package it in a way that was interesting.
Right.
You know, children are interested, they're curious. We need to really foster that to draw them in. So as I said, we work with all these artists, and we themed our maps to take place in different lands. And so, just like any game, call it the game of life, we wanted to give a game of education. So children see this as a game, and they say, I'm in the underwater world, and they love all the creatures, and yes, there are all these backstories to all these creatures, and they love that they can kind of adventure around in their mind. And I think that's where some of when I came in, I'm a perception scientist, so I study the way we bring in information through our eyes, through our sense of touch, through our ears, how our brain processes that information, and then how we learn to act in response to what comes in. So when you have a map, you are able to form a mental picture, just like cab drivers have maps inside of their head. So what we've done here is we've created something that naturally matches the way the brain works, a spatial map. And from, 7 and 8-year-olds who might be venturing underwater, to 9 and 10-year-olds who this level might be more sort of suited to. Again, always leaving room in the center, because that's the most important, is for chasing after your own personal goals, and there is nothing here. You set those goals for yourself. And every map connects the 3rd grade to the 4th grade. You zoom off in a rocket ship, and then bam, you're in outer space. And this is really where that imagination and that curiosity turns into motivation. Because children want to finish things, a puzzle. You don't leave a puzzle unfinished. Children want to take control of their ownership, but they've never had a tool to do that with. Mm-hmm. And just to give a preview, in older grades, we venture inside of a computer, actually inside of an arcade game. In the 7th grade, you learn about your nervous system and how your body is working. For later levels, you investigate different worlds. But that's the concept behind the CoreAtlas, is it's a set of maps and guidebooks that, yes, are directly for the student, but teachers find them very helpful. Parents have been over the moon, and so definitely on our Indiegogo campaign, you can see we interviewed a couple parents talking about their use of the CoreAtlas with their young ones and what it inspires.
In looking at the CoreAtlas map, I saw some numbers. What do the numbers correlate to with the guidebook and the map? There's some connection there?
Yeah.
Yes.
So each one of those circles on the map, we call it a pin, corresponds to just one page in the guidebook. And one page in the guidebook explains very simply one thing that you need to learn in mathematics, how to use tools, how to multiply, how to divide and solve word problems, base 10 numbers. So every page in this guidebook is one spot on the map. If you work through the guidebook, you've worked through the map.
And then there are stickers that correspond to each page in the guidebook. So, you know, you work on quest 10, which is about rounding numbers, and you see that there's a sticker for quest 10 that's got a little inset of the illustration from there. And then you pop that off and you put that on your map. And now you're able to visualize where you've been, where you're going. You know, oh, I haven't worked at all on operations and algebra. What's that all about? You know, wow, look at all of the fractions that you've been learning. Let's practice some fractions. I was about to make some pancakes this morning, but I need to double the recipe. Can you help me out?
And so when you've got a massive checklist, your brain now remembers because it's all in pictures. So you don't have to remember all the words. And so when a parent, if your child's in school, says, well, what did you learn in school today? You know, the child now has a reference that they care about.
And I will say, as a teacher, I used to often ask my students, you know, what did we learn this week? Because I would do some video news at the end of the week. And I can't tell you how many times my students would say, we did some math, we did some reading. But students young people who use the CoreAtlas, I ask them, what have you been learning? And they can tell me, like, a month ago, they're looking at their map, they're like, oh yeah, we did similes and metaphors, and yeah, oh right, we were rounding numbers. You know, it helps them when they have that map, like you were saying, it helps them keep it in mind.
Yeah, while this isn't brain science, it certainly utilizes some strategies that people like Aristotle and Cicero, even the new Sherlock Holmes that's now in, he has these memory palaces inside of his head.
Right.
And so when the teacher, the parent, and the student are all on the same page, it allows for a common conversation and that the child is excited about. When we're able to have a common conversation, a common language, if you will, the student, the young person, the learner, the seeker, is being supported by the key constituents around them. That's where the empowerment comes from. So it's a big loop. It's to get people to increase their awareness of what we need to learn. What is important to learn in mathematics or reading and writing? What is science really all about? Increasing that awareness, put it into a curious package, so that it can enable people to chase after their own goals and to really empower themselves. Because if that little boy wants to fix cars for a living, or make new cars, or make flying cars, this is the time where he should start. This is where his passion is highest. So let's get that on the map.
And teachers and parents in his life need to be more aware that that's a passion that he has, because then they can make the rest of his learning relevant. Right? Yeah. Which will increase his engagement, increase his success in life, you know, and help him feel cared about, which is what we all really want. Like when we're all human and we're all honest with each other, teachers, parents, like we all want to care for these young people, and the young people want to be cared for. And so this, I think, gives that opportunity in a way that I haven't seen as an elementary school teacher. And I became obsessed, Paul knows this, I became obsessed with the idea of young people taking charge of their learning. Those last couple of years of my career, because if you go on school district websites and elementary school websites, I would say like 90% of them say something about like, our students take responsibility for their learning, they take charge of their learning. And I wasn't seeing that happen in anyone's classroom. It certainly wasn't happening in my room for more than like a few minutes here or there.
And you were a teacher of the year in your school district.
Yeah, I was a teacher of the year. People loved me and I loved them, and you know, I was doing the best I could. But I really didn't feel like my students were, and by taking charge, I mean like knowing what you're learning, why you're learning, and charting your own progress, and having space for your own goals. Like that's someone who takes charge of their learning. And that's not happening. But I think that we've made a tool that can help that. And so I'm excited to get that out there to parents who are homeschooling, to teachers that are in public schools, private schools, because I think it's something that everyone wants, but they just don't know how to do it because they don't have the tools for it.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned your guys' background briefly. Could you mind, or would you mind sharing a little bit about your background? I guess we'll start with Sarah first, and you said you're a teacher. Can you talk a little bit about your background and experience there in the classroom?
Sure. Actually, my background starts before being a teacher. I was an actor and a writer. I was in a theater company. I wrote for a newspaper in Santa Barbara. So the arts have always meant a lot to me, and storytelling has always meant a lot to me. But then I discovered that I love spending time with young people and experiencing that spark of openness and possibility. And so I went through UC Santa Cruz teacher credentialing and master's program, and I became a teacher, and I've taught second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. I taught a 3-4 combo. I've taught writing to middle schoolers during the summers. I've also been a teacher consultant for UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Education Bay Area Writing Project, where I go to both schools and also nonprofits and help them figure out how to improve their instruction, specifically around writing, but I'm just passionate about teaching in general, so I tend to talk with people about things not related to, because it's all related.
Yeah.
Math, reading, writing, it's all just learning. So I have a background very steeped in storytelling and in engaging with people through learning and education, mostly in the public school system. Yeah.
Excellent. And Dr. Bulikowski, how about your background?
Yeah, so I realized when I was thinking about this earlier that my education really started on the mound and the baseball diamond. I was a pitcher. And it's an interesting position because you're the sort of leader of the defense. And you need to be working with everyone else. You can't actually do anything, you can't score any points. But you can work with your team to create the best sort of ensemble that you can, to give yourself the best chances. And so really that's where my early education came from. I didn't pay attention in school until my senior year in high school, where I took an honors psychology class, and I also took one of the first ever courses in neuroscience for high schoolers. And it was there that I walked into the classroom and the teacher said, "Welcome to neuroscience." This is 1997. "Welcome to neuroscience. We don't know a lot about this field, but we're going to be learning together." And so it was the first time that a teacher and I were going to be learning together, and it just really ignited me. I went through college, I studied philosophy, I studied neuroscience, I studied psychology. I did research with the National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, trying to really understand what creates enriching environments. I worked with children with autism and autism spectrum disorders. And so really I was focused on very simple skills of perception and action. How do we grab onto a slide? And I loved working with children to design balance beams that perceptually got them very focused on what they were doing, what they were learning. From college, I went on to graduate school at University of California, Davis. There I studied perception, cognition, and cognitive neuroscience, a little bit of developmental psychology, got my master's and PhD from UC Davis. 2009, 2010, I did what's called a postdoctoral fellowship. It's where I dug in a little bit deeper into my research, and I started working with people with visual impairment, and I really got a sense of like how to work with your hands and how the brain processes information about what's coming into our bodies, our diets, our sort of sensory diets. After that, I was at the University of the Pacific. I was a professor. I was an assistant professor in the psychology department. There, my specialty was cognitive neuroscience. And so again, I taught people about how their bodies worked and how it produced a sense of self and consciousness. Also, since 2008, it's worth noting that I've been working with the Graduate School of Education at the University of California, Berkeley. And I've been in their Natural Sciences division teaching advanced psychology as well as cognitive neuroscience classes for children that are the same age that when I found out about my brain and how it started to work, I just needed to give back, and I continue to do that to today. Thanks.
Awesome. That's very exciting. Now, just wrapping up here, you guys have produced a very exciting guidebook and map for young people inside of public schools, private schools, homeschooling. Is there any last words you want to share with parents, teachers, administrators who are considering implementing your atlas and map inside their school system?
Yeah, reach out to us. We'd love to try to understand what your needs are, because the CoreAtlas is kind of a multi-tool. And so a Swiss Army knife would work well for someone who needs a screwdriver, but it also works well for someone who needs a leather punch.
Right.
And so we need to find out what your needs are. There are tutoring services and homeschooling services out in San Francisco that we just talk with them. And so I think the first step would just be reach out to us. Check out our website, mindmyeducation.com. That's MindMyeducation.com. We also have a live Indiegogo campaign. You can get us on there. We'll be live just for the next 45 days or so.
Yeah, let me think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
If there's anything else that we want to say.
You guys did good. That was good. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
So-
really high energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the last thing I'd like to say is much like I feel a lot of gratitude to the parents who trusted me with their children, for a year, 6 hours a day. I want to thank the people who have taken the time to watch this, because I consider this project, the CoreAtlas, yet another expression of my respect and love for young people, and the fact that you've taken the time to watch this and to learn about how these two crazy educators are offering a solution that I think just might help everybody with the way that things are get a little bit closer to a more dignified education for young people. So thank you for taking the time to see what we've done.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.